We're going to talk about accelerating investigations with Cisco Threat Response, a tool that makes your security investigations much more efficient and much more effective in the amount of time that you have to do those investigations. And we're going to go through the following things. I want to talk about the problem that Threat Response was designed to solve, and then about how we're solving it. I'm going to show you a demo that gives you an idea of how we bring all of these different technologies together and what you can do with that combination. Talk a little bit about deployment details, how our customers are able to get and then use Threat Response, and then open it up to you for any questions that you might have had along the way. So let's talk about the challenges. This is not a surprise to anyone. Threat investigations can be complicated. You've got a lot of moving pieces in the network. You've got a lot of different points of visibility as a malicious campaign might be unfolding across your environment. All these different kinds of technologies that can give you pieces of that puzzle. And to put those puzzles together, to find those pieces, we don't have enough people in the typical enterprise. Okay, security operations centers are notoriously understaffed. There was 2 million open security jobs at the end of last year, projected to be possibly as high as 5 million in 2020. And those understaffed SOCs are overwhelmed with multiple alerts coming in from all different directions, different formats, half of which generally end up on the floor ignored. Of those that are investigated, many of those the investigation is never completed. And simply put, SOCs are unable to keep pace with the changing nature and the sheer volume of the current threat landscape. So security needs to work together to solve this kind of problem. Security technologies need to work together, but most of the time, they don't. So security operators tend to have two kinds of questions. I know about a thing, is it bad? How do I find out that it's bad? Why is it bad? Why has it been decided that this thing is bad? In what way is it bad? And then the other half of that is, has it affected us? Is it in my organization? Is it in my network? And if so, where? How did it get in? What is it doing there? And to answer those two broad categories of questions, we've got all different kinds of security technologies and threat intelligence. The industry has done a great job of providing niche solutions to solve niche problems. Okay, we have email security, endpoint security, web security. We have SIEMs, we have SOARs, we have IPS, malware detection, identity management, all of these different categories. And of course, in any one of these categories, any specific organization might have several examples of that kind of technology. You might have multiple threat intelligence vendors. You might work for a company that bought a company or that got acquired by another company, and now you have one network that's got two different antivirus programs running, depending on which department you're in, which company you came in as part of that acquisition. So it's a lot for a security practitioner to bring to bear on a problem. The average SOC, or not the average SOC, but some SOCs have up to 75 different security technologies working all at once, and then might be pivoting between up to all of those in the course of trying to solve any specific security problem, or even find out what the problem is specifically. So what we've done at Cisco is built an integrated security architecture. And we've done this over time. It's not a secret, probably to anybody in this room, that Cisco's security portfolio was built by acquiring companies, okay, by buying companies that had delivered a best-in-breed solution, which means that all of these security products were written by engineering teams that had never spoken to each other, because why would they? They were different companies solving different problems. And so all this has to work together, and we've built it into this integrated architecture by making sure that all of these products have APIs, these APIs are easy to work with, and then building tools that leverage those APIs from one product to another. And so now we've got this environment where our products have threat intelligence fed in from Talos, Research Group, and other sources, trust verification, we've got visibility and control at the endpoint, on the network, in the cloud, we've got tools to manage this, and it's all coming together. And threat response is where it comes together the best, you might say. We're talking about a platform approach to solving security and even networking problems. And threat response is us putting that into actual code. So we're able to automate integrations by providing simple 1, 2, 3-step configurations that tie multiple products into this central interface. that you can look at the results of investigating in multiple products all in one location on one screen. Literally painted for you in a picture that's intuitive to understand and makes sense to the average practitioner visually and immediately. It allows you to respond in the same interface that you used to define and identify the problem in the first place. It's simple to use, you can do detections, you can investigate threats, and you can remediate across multiple security technologies all in one interface. It's fast because you're no longer copying and pasting out of one thing into a dozen or maybe 75 other things. You don't have to build your mental model, in Notepad or Excel spreadsheet, or if you're lucky, some kind of case management software. And it's effective because you can take that threat intelligence and turn it into near immediate action. Oh, I found out that this domain is malicious because it's used for command and control by this botnet that I'm investigating. Click, click, I've blocked it across my network. I didn't even have to go into any other technology to be able to affect that mitigation. A ton of analyst time is spent copying and pasting and switching interfaces, and of course every one of these interfaces in a different security product has a different workflow. There's a different design aesthetic that was deployed when they designed the UI. And so analysts are constantly code switching. Oh, I'm in this product, that means the search box is bottom left. I'm in this product, which means I have to click, click to get to the search box, which is on the top right, and so on. It's unnecessary mental labor that we are working to get rid of. And of course, we have the industry's best threat intelligence. Everyone has heard of Talos, Cisco's 24/7 globally distributed research group that provides intelligence into our entire architecture. And through all of those different integrations, you get the benefits of Talos intelligence in the individual products that protect different parts of your network or different technologies. And with Cisco Threat Response, you get it all there as well. So what products are we integrating with? What products have we brought into the Threat Response family of security protection? Cisco AMP for endpoints, protecting your endpoints, and with AMP licensing on some of our other products, protecting your firewall, protecting your email and web traffic. We've got Cisco Umbrella, our DNS security solution. Cisco Email Security. BritGrid, our file analysis platform. Firepower, obviously, our firewalls line. And then recently, we've integrated StealthWatch Enterprise, which is deep network analytics. And then we have a direct integration with email security, so we already have email security in the list. The first version of that was using a security management appliance, the SMA. Now that's not a required part of the equation to be able to get threat response capability in your ESA. And recently, really recently, we rolled out a web security integration, both directly and if your WSAs are managed by an SMA. So that's the family of threat response capable products right now. Now, of course, we're looking to bring in the entire security portfolio and perhaps even beyond our security products. And we're going to revisit some of these integrations now that threat response has grown, especially since the last time I did one of these about threat response. And we're going to revisit some of those integrations and bring some of the additional visibility and response functions from, for example, the firewall or email security products, and make those functions available through the threat response interface.
Just a quick question regarding this. At the beginning, this was only available on the US cloud. Is this also for Europe, because we are at Cisco Live Europe? Is this all now available in the Cisco EMEA cloud?
That's a really good question. Yes, we are at Cisco Live Europe, and all of the features of the integrations are rolled out first in the US cloud. But we do have a European cloud for threat response as well, and generally those time lags between a feature's availability in the US and its availability in Europe, that is shrinking.
Okay.
So right now, we just rolled out Web Security Appliance last week, that integration, and so I don't believe it's available yet in Europe. But if it's not, it will be very soon.
Okay, cool.
Another question would be if this will become available with other vendors' security technologies as well.
Third-party support. So one example of that was available when we first shipped the very first version of this. Let's talk for a minute about VirusTotal. Cisco does not own VirusTotal. We don't have any official relationship with VirusTotal, but they have an open API of their own. You can go to virustotal.com right now and sign up for an account to get an API key of your own. And then there's a module in Threat Response that you can configure. All of these API relationships, communications, are mediated by what we call modules, which is just a little bit of code that handles the API for that technology. So we have a module for VirusTotal. You go and you add that module, and you put in your API keys because they're yours, and we will use them on your behalf, and we can ask VirusTotal for information about anything that you're investigating. So third-party products can be handled that way, and Threat Response uses the APIs of all these different technologies to talk to each. I have an API that I use to access the WSA. I have an API that I use to access the ESA, Firepower, and for endpoints, and so on. But Threat Response also has an API. So we've got integrations out, or in the works, where other products are using the Threat Response API to find out what their customers, who are also Cisco customers, what are their Cisco technologies telling them about whatever threat it is that they're working on in that product. There's multiple different ways these integrations can go. Threat Response generally relies on the data storage capabilities of the product we're asking. I'm not going to bring in the entirety of my ESA logs to find out if anybody has ever emailed me a specific file hash. I'm just going to ask ESA. Look through your data and tell me if you've ever seen this file. But we do maintain a smallish database. I shouldn't even say smallish. We think of it as small, but we do maintain a database that's available for you to write your own information to. And so an example of a third-party integration that's being working on is with a company called, or a product called Signal Sciences. And that product can write information to Threat Response to this private database that's for your usage. And then that information is in the data store that Threat Response will check when you're doing an investigation on anything else. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
I got a question too. If you're asking like VirusTotal or other sources, is that a manual process or is it happening automatically? Because especially with VirusTotal, you can run into problems if you, for example, ask them for a hash of a malware or something, and then the bad guys know that they've been found. So
the bad guys wouldn't know. So when you submit a piece of malware to VirusTotal, that's different than the integration that I'm talking about. So if you submit a piece of malware to VirusTotal and it gets published there, and the malware authors are watching VirusTotal, yes, they're going to be aware that their code has been found. We don't submit the actual file to VirusTotal, but we will ask if they've seen the file hash. So nobody gets a notification when their file hash has been searched for in VirusTotal.
And that happens automatically.
Yeah, it does happen automatically because once you configure a module, which is a manual process, but the VirusTotal module, all you do is you put in your API keys.
Yeah.
It's less than a 1-minute operation, and then that's done. Mm-hmm. And then it will automatically inquire of VirusTotal and also all the Cisco technologies every time you do an investigation. You never have to do that configuration step again. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, excellent. So I mentioned in passing, very briefly earlier, a platform approach. Threat Response has been out for just about 2 years now, and we've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and it's really getting to be a much better platform, or sorry, a product, tool set, every time we do a release, which by the way is every 2 weeks. Very, very agile development cycle. And we've taken what we've learned, and we're thinking about what can we do with this kind of design philosophy outside of the world of threat hunting and incident response. And so you're going to hear more about Cisco Security's platform approach. And when you start hearing about that, this is the kind of thing you can expect. The examples that are thrown out, that are shown as threat response, are the same kind of thinking that we're going to bring to the platform when that is officially announced. You've heard us talk about how we're working towards it. We're going to be announcing more about it, of course, as those design decisions are made. But really the core philosophy is you shouldn't have to go to multiple different products to do all the different steps of a workflow if we can bring all of those steps together into one interface. We're never going to be a single pane of glass for everything. We're not rewriting FMC, okay? We're just not. But the most critical sort of first strike response capabilities that each product offers should be available to you all in one place. And that's what we're doing. Streamlining all of the workflows that your security operations teams are presented with on a regular basis. You have to do this stuff, or your teams have to do this stuff 10, 15, 20 times a day. It shouldn't be as difficult as possibly navigating between a large subset of a 75 tool kit. Like, you just shouldn't have to do this. All this copying and pasting and code switching and 15 tabs open in the browser. We can do better than this. And we are doing better than this, and threat response is where we're starting. So I'm going to run through a demo It's a little bit of a strange demo because it's rendered 100% in slideware so that we don't have to worry about hotel Wi-Fi. But it shows you a workflow and what it can look like using Cisco Threat Response. And we're going to start in the Talos blog. So I mentioned Talos. We're using the Talos blog as an example because it's a Cisco property. Talos is a Cisco team. But I want you to bear in mind as we go through this, this could be anything. Okay, it could be any other security blog that you like. It could be an alert posted on an ISAC web page or a CERT web page. It could be maybe not even a blog or an article about a threat. It could be maybe your Splunk interface. It could be the web accessible management interface for your endpoint security solution, which maybe mistakes were made and maybe it's not by Cisco. Entirely third-party capable, because everything that is rendered in a browser is something that you can use at the beginning of the workflow that I'm about to show you. So this is the Talos blog. Okay, detailed information about all of the interesting things that they get to research. And at the end of the Talos blog, there's this indicators of compromise section where applicable. And this is where you'll find everything that's been mentioned in the article that's observable, that's something you can look for in your logs. They copy it all and have it listed here together at the bottom. And so we're going to start there. We're going to just highlight this file hash. We're going to show what a simple operation chain can look like without threat response. So I'm looking for this file hash. I'm going to go into my endpoint security solution, which in this case is AMP, and I'm going to search for that file hash. So the search bar is up at top right. I'm going to put the file hash in. I'm going to find out that, yes, this has been seen a couple times in my organization, and it's got this file name, and it's been seen talking to those 3 IP addresses. So I add those 3 IP addresses to my ongoing investigation. Now I have all the things that were listed in the blog, plus these 3 IP addresses that I found using AMP for endpoints. Then I'm going to go into my DNS security solution. In this case, Cisco Umbrella. And I'm going to click on reporting and then activity search. I want to paste in the first domain that I'm looking for. And it's going to tell me that, yes, 4 times something in my network has asked for a resolution on that domain name. Okay, so I record that information in my investigation. Maybe I'm keeping something in Notepad or in an Excel spreadsheet, or like I said, if you're lucky and your department has budget, maybe you have case management software. Either way, you're copying and pasting into all of these different things and then back out of and trying to organize that information yourself. So here we are in Email Security Appliance looking for that file hash. I find out it was emailed in. I've got 5 internal recipients that have received this file hash. Maybe I need to check those users and see if the file has been seen on any of their machines. So I'm going back into AMP for endpoints and looking for that file hash again on those machines. This is my Firepower Management Center. I've got IP addresses that were mentioned in the blog. I'm going to go through FMC and see if it noted any connection attempts being made to or from those IP addresses, and so on. I'm not even going to bore you with the rest of the story at this point.
By the way, nice new GUI.
I'm sorry?
Nice new GUI on the FMC, yeah?
The FMC is I mean, they've had some time to get it to be really, really effective. But yeah, there's a fair amount of navigation you have to get to this space, and then you have to know which of these inputs am I going to put that IP address into. And it's not that it's hard. It's just that it's different from every other tool you're using. Every tool has its own workflow, its own UI.
So Ben, this interface is the interface of the product, the threat management response. This is the interface we have to use to use your...
Without threat response, these are the interfaces that you would be using. And they're just examples, and they're not bad interfaces, but like I said, it's just that they're each different and time-consuming.
And you just get in there. You don't have to run to any other tool to do your analysis or whatever.
What I'm showing right now is, yeah, going into each of these different tools, and you would be going, these are just examples. You might have another 10 tools you have to check after FMC.
But you're always doing that within Firepower Management Center, right? These are several modules within the application, or are you jumping from one SP?
I'm jumping from one to another to show what the world looks like without threat response.
Okay.
If you're not working in the SOC, there are people working in your SOC, and they are doing this, I guarantee you. Mm-hmm. They're jumping between all of these different interfaces, pasting the appropriate information into the search bars of those different interfaces, filtering, finding out what happened that's relevant to this observable. And there might be 15, 20, 30 observables listed in the analysis of the threat that they're trying to find in your network. And so for each one item, they're going through this list of interfaces to find out if this product found that item.
Okay.
So if you have 10 observables and you've got 10 technologies to check, that's 100 copy and paste operations.
It can be even worse sometimes We have one team doing the email security, yeah. They are then exchanging the hashes. Then another team that is doing, I don't know, the network side of things. Another one that is managing the DNS security.
You're absolutely right. And just to simplify the example that I'm giving, I didn't dive into that, but since you brought it up, this could be different teams that have access to these different interfaces. So if I'm on the investigations team and I'm investigating this threat that Talos wrote about, I might not be interfacing directly with the email security appliance UI. I might be emailing somebody or chatting to them and saying, hey, can you look this up for me? And then you're slotted into their priority chain and they'll get back to you when they do.
Yeah, it becomes a ping pong. You're using email all the time, or IM, and it doesn't help too much.
Right. And so this is what it looks like if you're using threat response. So we're going to start in the same blog, okay, just to be fair. We're in the Talos blog. It's the article about the same threat, and I'm not even going to scroll down. Guys, I got stuff to do. I'm not even going to read the article. It's a great article. I'm not trying to talk badly about the article, but I have a list of things coming into my desk that I need to deal with. I'm going to hit a button in my browser and open up this little pop-up. It says that it's searching the contents of my browser for observables. So that takes like less than a second. It's found 16 of them. And now, before it even shows me what they are, it's doing lookups on the back end to ask threat response, what do you know about item 1? What do you know about item 2? What do you know about item 3? And it's pulling back reputations and showing me at a glance, okay, so this thing's bad, this thing's unknown, these 2 files are bad, snort.org is on the page because it's listed in the footers further down in the article, but it's okay. Like it's snort.org, it's fine, it's green. And then so on. Office with a 0360.com, clearly that's probably not good. So it's listed as malicious and so on. Not only that, so here I am in my browser. I haven't gone to any security tool yet. I'm just reading an article on the internet. But already I have a list of the observables that are mentioned in that article, and I have verdicts on what their current reputation is. So now, I have little drop-down arrows next to each of these. So rimrun.com, and then I have this little drop-down arrow. What's that button do? Well, if I click it, I then get the capabilities that are brought to threat response by each of my integrated modules right here in a menu I can use from my browser. So this is a domain. I have umbrella. I can block this domain from the article in which I first found out about it. So I click block this domain, and that's done in Umbrella, and now nothing in my network can contact that domain unless I decide to go back in there and unblock it, which I can do after I hit that button. But immediate response capabilities. Click, click, solved. I didn't have to go to Umbrella to do that. I didn't have to navigate through the Umbrella user interface and remember where the controls are to edit my block list. I didn't even have to go into threat response. Just right where I find the information, I have reasonable and actionable options I can take on that information. I'm going to select all of the malicious items that are in this article and all of the unknown items that were mentioned in this article. I'm going to leave snort.org out of it because I know that it's clean. And then I'm going to click on investigate. And now we're in threat response proper. This is actually what threat response looks like. And so I'm going to walk you through the interface a little bit. There's a lot going on here. We try to pack a lot into this screen so that you can intuitively and quickly get the answers that you're looking for. At the very top, we've got this metrics bar. Hopefully everybody can see what it says. But it says 5 targets, in case you can't. It says 5 targets, and that tells me that 5 assets of mine, 5 things in my network, have in some way interacted with one of the 15 things that I'm currently investigating. So right away I know that I have got a problem of some kind. Okay, this article that mentioned all these different observables that are used in the course of a known malicious campaign that they're investigating, 5 times, at least one of those has been seen by at least one thing in my network.
Quick question. Is this the start screen?
Is this the start screen?
If I log into threat response, is this the screen that I get up front?
If you log into threat response, you're not yet doing an investigation, and this screen shows the results of an investigation.
Yeah, okay, but is this, what is the first screen that I come into when I go into threat response? Is that this one, or
if you don't have if you don't pivot into threat response from some other product that's starting an investigation? So we came in via the browser plugin. and I hit investigate on this set of observables that I had loaded in the browser plugin. This is the result of the first stage of that investigation. If I don't have an investigation that I'm going into threat response with, if I just go to the URL for threat response and log in, I'm going to be presented with a screen that's got a big text field that's going to ask me to paste in my investigation text.
Okay. So why not make this a little bit more visible, I would say? Just get some tiles and drive into whatever problems you have. There's a lot on the screen right now, but I would like...
So maybe I have something to plug onto what Aaron is saying. So the tool is primarily driven to make investigations, right? It is not a proactive console where you get presented with a set of, let's say, whatever metrics about threats which were found in the environment.
Yeah, it's not really meant to be a dashboarding tool. That's not the problem that we're looking to solve. We're looking to solve the problem that investigations require all these different technologies that you have to access separately and that work in different ways. It's not a high-level overview of the state of your network. It's a tool that brings together visibility from various points of your network so that you don't have to go digging for it in all those different places.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is not the usual tool that people use to monitor metrics like I have 100 vulnerabilities and there's something misconfigured here and there. This is really driven by investigating and taking that kind of approach.
This is literally a tool for threat response.
Okay.
So you already know there's a threat, and your response is you're investigating the threat, and we're going to help you do that. But the kinds of things you're talking about, the ability to bring in more high-level statistical dashboard information from multiple tools, I want you to remember that question when you start hearing more about the platform. Because that's going to be in what we release as the platform. When we make that announcement, you're going to hear more about it. But this is the design philosophy that's driving that process as well. Let's bring in information. In this case, it's detailed investigation-related information. In a dashboarding case, it would be more higher-level statistical information. But the ability to bring that in from multiple different sources all into one console is still going to be key to that design process.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So with that said, we've got some high-level statistics about this specific investigation in that top metrics bar. Okay? 5 targets, a total of 15 observables, 77 different indicators have been triggered. An indicator is something that tells you more about a specific sighting. It could be an IPS signature, it could be information from ThreatGrid, it could be a StealthWatch enterprise signature, and so on. Okay? Our observables break down as 5 domains, 6 file hashes, 4 IP addresses, and 0 URLs. Those are all listed out. And on the right, you see 7 modules. So just a bit of quick math, I investigated 15 observables across all of my modules, of which 7 had a result. So that's 7 times 15 different things I didn't have to do. I just clicked investigate. And it loaded all of this information from all of those different sources. That doesn't even include the modules that didn't have any information because they hadn't been seen by that technology. And below that on the screen, this is my investigation pane. Okay, if I log into threat response and I don't yet have an investigation that I'm loading, this is basically what that first screen is going to look like. Be a big text window that says paste your stuff here. You can paste in anything. It can be arbitrary text. You can just type right into it. It'll pull out the observables the same way we did on the web page and turn those into a list of observables that are actually going to be investigated. To the left of that, you have the sightings timeline. This is a histogram of when these observables were seen in my environment. The height and the size of the purple dot indicate how many targets there were and how frequently the thing was seen in that day. You see the first date, the last date. The relations graph is the part of the interface that most users spend most of their time in. And this is where you initially get that very intuitive display, like when I said it literally paints a picture, this is what I was talking about, of how the different observables are related to each other. So we have 2 targets that were contacted by this IP address. We have this domain that is the reverse resolution lookup on that IP address. We have this file hash, which is known to contact that IP address. Okay, 1 thing in my network reached out to that IP address and also asked for a resolution on this office360.com domain. And we have 2 more targets that ask for resolutions on that domain. And then to the right of that, we have the observables panel. If you want to do a deep dive into any of the observables in this investigation, this is where you do it. And in this example, I've got the judgments tab loaded. And so I see the judgments that came in against this observable, this file hash, has been judged by these two modules, and both of them said that this thing was malicious.
I totally understand what you said to my other question. I see a couple of things in the relations graph. I see drop-down thingies.
Yes.
And I see some, how do you call it? Monocular glasses or something like that. It's like, can you drill into those things?
Yes. So the drop-downs are the same drop-down that I showed you in the browser plugin. That offers you the pivot menu on that observable, and that's always going to be the same based on a combination of two factors. What modules do you have configured, and what kind of observable is it? So anytime you see that pivot menu drop-down on a domain, if you have Umbrella configured, you're going to have the option of blocking the domain and pivoting into the Umbrella interface to do deep dive research on that domain. If it's an IP address, and you've got the Firepower module, and this is a future version of the release where we can block IPs in Firepower, you'll have that option. So it's controlled by those two factors. What kind of thing is it, and what technologies do you have installed that can deal with that kind of thing? Okay. And that's not only is it throughout the threat response interface, but it's also in the interfaces of the threat response capable products. So if you're an AMP for endpoints, and there's a IP address listed, and you have threat response enabled, you're going to see that little drop-down menu, and you can hit it and get all of your threat response options that are available to IP addresses based on what modules you have configured. If you're in ThreatGrid, our file analysis platform, and you see a domain listed because you're looking at a sample analysis, and that sample contacted a domain, it tells you what domain it is. Next to that domain, there's going to be a little drop-down, and you hit that button, and you get the pivot menu from threat response with all of your threat response options loaded, which is why if you're in ThreatGrid, if you're in the portal for ThreatGrid and you're looking at the analysis report for a sample you submitted and it reaches out to a domain, you can click a button and get the pivot menu and then click another button and you've blocked that domain. ThreatGrid lives in the cloud and knows nothing about your network. Doesn't care whatsoever.
So look,
but because it's tied into threat response, and because threat response, your threat response account does know about your network and does have agents in your network via your Umbrella installation or AMP for endpoints, you can actually take response actions from ThreatGrid. And that's the power of tying everything together. Okay, threat response acts in many ways as an API aggregator and as a mediator, as the glue that holds the integrated architecture together and allows you to do those traversals. You got a question?
Yeah, which is going to be probably very stupid anyways, but what you're doing, what you are showing there is the browser. You have this module which is parsing the website, if I get it right.
Yes.
And then on the back end, you are checking based on several modules or sources which are looking for threads. You'll plug probably to several databases, whatever. But do you think, and it's probably going to sound very stupid, but do you think that the ability to scan pages and to look at links and whatever, do you think that it could be used or misused by an organization, and maybe I'm more thinking about kind of a nation state, you know, which try to set control on what people are allowed to do. Do you think that you can use that to, you know, bulk pairs links, pages and all, and block domains and make sure, for example, that citizens don't get access to certain websites or whatever? Thinking of states which are running intranets. Maybe totally off topic for the presentation. We can take it offline if you want.
Kind of a detour, but it's an interesting one. So let me ask you this. If somebody is already in your browser to the extent that they can use your browser plugins for you or against you, do you have bigger problems than the browser plugin?
Well, it depends, because you can imagine that you have a SOC, for example, but which is run by a state, and they're just monitoring the web, and they're going on site. They can go to whatever, to the New York Post, to go to the Washington Post. They can run, you know, activist websites, and they can just parse there and find informations there. And they can, you know, that's what I'm meaning. Not that you as a user,
I understand
or as a
that.
citizen, you're using your browser, because of course you don't want to get an external module to that, but rather have kind of a state organization which runs that and checks that.
You could theoretically put an entire country behind Umbrella DNS security, and then you could block URLs using Umbrella DNS security, and that block would affect the entire country.
Yep.
Yes, that's correct. It's also correct of any other domain filtering solution.
Are you selling this to North Korea?
Sorry?
Are you selling this to North Korea? Just the question.
I actually don't even know the answer to
But
that
with
question.
threat response, it's so much easily to block another one. Yeah, so they just go here and right click.
Could a nation state deploy this against its own citizens? The answer is always going to be yes, no matter what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Could a third-party malicious actor leverage this to attack the users behind Umbrella? Like I said, if they're already in your browser, they can do a whole lot of other things that are just as quick and probably worse.
Implicitly, of course, if the people have the money and the skill set behind that, they're probably not going to use a commercial software for that, probably. That's probably the response, right?
Yeah.
That just came to my mind.
That's fair. Like I said, it was an interesting detour.
What I like on your thing, it's said 22nd of December. This is what we call the threat season, yeah? Where it first arrived, yeah.
Everything happens right when people are trying to go on vacation, right? Including making my slides. And so what we have here on this page is a lot of information that the user can kind of choose where it is that they need to go. You can look up the specific sightings, the four times that this hash has been seen in your network. If you click on sightings, it'll show you each of those 4 times. And if they were all 4 reported by AMP for endpoints, for example, you would have a little button you could click to go to AMP for endpoints, to then pivot into the exact part of that interface. Instead of you having to hunt through it and find out where to look, you can go to the exact part in that device's device trajectory where it encountered that file, and you can see what was the file that downloaded this file. If it was downloaded from a website, what website was it, and so on. So there's this ability to follow the chains of an investigation. But I want to reiterate. 15 enrichments of 15 observables done by 7 modules. You didn't have to do all that. We clicked one button to get here. Okay, we clicked one button to open the browser, and then we clicked a couple other buttons to show off. But really, to get here, we opened the browser plugin, and we hit investigate. And we have all of this information that you didn't have to manually paste together and like bust out Microsoft Paint and make a bad version of that diagram to explain to your boss what happened. It's all done for you in seconds. Now, we skipped ahead a bit because I got asked this question, but here's the pivot menu, which reminds me I never answered about the magnifying glasses. The magnifying glass just means that this is part of my investigation. This has a magnifying glass, which means it's listed up here. It means I was looking for that thing. Anything in this graph that doesn't have a magnifying glass is something that threat response told me about in response to my questions about the things that did. So it told me about these targets. Threat response told me about this file. I didn't ask about this file. I asked about this IP address, and threat response says, hey, I know a file that talks to that IP address, and this is the file. So now on this file hash, I've got that pivot menu. I'm going to hit that button. Okay, and I'm going to get my options. I'm going to add this file into this ongoing investigation. So 15 observables, I'm going to add this file, and I'm going to skip a step and add another thing, and now I've got 17 observables in my investigation. You can see I've got a bit more information here. This can start to get complex fairly quickly depending on what you add and how often it's been seen, but here I see that this file was sent into my environment over email. I've got 3 different email addresses to which this file was sent. I've got the Cisco message IDs, I've got the email subject, mid-year bonus, I've got the name of the file when it was emailed into me, midyearbonus.exe. I've got what appears to be a training issue because user Alexa is in the file path here. So Alexa is one of the recipients of my email. The file has been seen on Alexa's machine. Alexa double-clicked, opened up that attachment against all my prior recommendations, and ran an executable that came from a third-party source, which, by the way, I have the domain and the email address from which that email came also. So even though it's not supported right now as a directly integrated response capability, I can, of course, go to my email security appliance and start blocking emails that have that come from that domain. But here's the domain. It's got a pivot menu button on it. So I'm going to open that up, and I can block that domain immediately in Umbrella. And I'm also going to go to Alexa, which has AMP for endpoints running on it. Alexa's been bad. I'm going to drop Alexa off the network right here. You don't get to do that twice. So I'm going to start host isolation, which is basically the AMP endpoint agent on that box, just not accepting network connections until somebody goes and cleans that machine up and turns off host isolation on Alexa once it's been, whatever my company's forensics and triage process is.
Can you add additional triggers to any of these? So, for example, if you isolate Alexa from the network because she's been bad, can you have that initiate a workflow to talk to HR?
All I can say about that is that some very preliminary design work is being done about customizable response actions. End topic.
Roadmap. Got it.
So what about surfacing up the quality of this investigation? So are there, data sources missing? Does it surface up, okay, there should be information from, I don't know, this side of your network or this type of application, but I don't have any info. Does it show you what info you're missing?
It doesn't show you those gaps as a positive thing in the chart, but you might notice as you're doing an investigation, you might just notice, hey, it sure would be good if I could tell if this had been downloaded over a web connection. And then maybe you decide that you're going to tie in your web security solution to threat response, whether that means you have Cisco web security and you're going to now add it into threat response because you didn't do that configuration work before, or whether you're going to maybe start looking for a web security solution and see how you can tie that one into threat response, either just by buying a Cisco one or seeing if there's a third-party application or, integration available for it. For sure. So it doesn't actually come out and tell you, like, you have no web visibility.
Right.
But you might notice that you have none. As you start doing more of these investigations more frequently, your users, your operators might be able to tell you, hey, we could do more if we had this kind of capability.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just on his point about the data sources, if we are supposed to, or we are allowed to have integration with some other solutions that might not be Cisco, because I understand this is just covering the whole, ecosystem, but before you mentioned they will be integrated with other applications or appliances that are API driven, what about something which is no API driven that is just throwing information about what is happening on the network? Because not everybody will have the latest tool, the latest story, the beefy box there. So how do we play with it in a network that doesn't have all these goodies?
Almost every security solution has logs of some kind. And you can capture those logs, and you can actually upload them into that database I was talking about before, the threat response keeps on your behalf that is consulted in every investigation you do. That's how you would handle that kind of integration. You would write some little piece of middleware that takes the logs from that product and then uploads it up into that private data store in threat response.
So we get to do some randomization there.
There would be some custom coding to make that work, but I mean, it's a fairly short Python script in most cases.
Yeah. Okay.
You need to store this data somewhere, especially if you have a lot of logs.
Yeah. And so what we haven't explored yet is how much information are we going to allow users to keep for free?
When it comes to that, I mean, one of the most used solutions is probably Splunk for storing log lines. And I worked for Airbus, and I know that their log volume is like in the high terabyte volume.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of stuff, and they won't probably be able
and a lot of places don't want to just like bulk upload all of that to a cloud solution. We totally get that. Yeah. And obviously Splunk has great market penetration, and we're looking at integrations with Splunk already, where the information stays in Splunk, it stays on-prem in Splunk, and we are able to ask questions of Splunk, and Splunk will return only that information that's relevant to answer that question. So I can talk about the way it works with ESA and WSA. Those don't upload their logs into the threat response cloud whatsoever. What they do is they open a channel. And this is user configurable. It doesn't do it by default. But if you want, it opens a channel. It reaches out on boot up, and it goes to threat response and says, hey, I'm here. You can ask me questions. And then that channel is open. It's open from inside the network, so you don't have to like allow out inbound connections from the scary cloud. That channel is opened by your device on your behalf, and threat response will, when it needs to ask a question, use that channel to communicate. And so similar things are possible with third-party products. If they will open that kind of channel, then we can use that channel to ask, in this example, Splunk, hey, have you seen this file hash or whatever it is?
But just to clarify, if you need to do an investigation, you do a live query over the channel, or are there any data uploads to threat response?
There's two different ways that can be handled. And one is the bulk upload that I talked about earlier, that, let's face it, most people don't want to do, and that has high data storage costs. And then there's that channel where, yes, the questions are asked live when the investigation is done. So I click investigate, and that sets off a chain of a chain of operations that includes asking each of my modules about each of the things in the list. So hr-ypro.com on the screen right now is the top observable just because that's the way it was ordered. And so I'm going to ask ESA, hey, have you seen anything about hi-ypro.com? WSA, have you seen anything about hi-ypro.com? And so on down the list. And when you do this, and it's actually like the real interface and not PowerPoint slides about it, there's a little spinning thing that tells you that it's still in operation. You'll see that 17 out of 17. You'll see that count up. 1 out of 17 done, 2 out of 17 done, 3 out of 17, and so on. And sometimes it can take like several seconds as it's asking all these questions of all these configured modules about all of these observables. But it's done live when you're doing the investigation, and those communications do go out over the network back into on-prem devices to ask those questions.
And you're doing over the same channel, if I want to stop something now, add this to the blacklist, yeah, that would be also communicated to...
It's also done through the module. It's different API calls, obviously. But yes, that's done through the module, and it's done over the same network connection.
Okay.
Everybody loves this question. What's the upfront cost? Sure, we get all of this, but what do I have to do to set it up? That's the question. So, it's included in the licensing of any integrated product. If you buy a product from Cisco that is threat response capable, you get threat response. It's not an extra thing you have to buy. It's not another box that you have to have shipped into your loading dock. It's not even a box. It's 100% cloud hosted. But you don't have to, there's no SKU associated with it. You don't have to add it as a line item on your Cisco invoices. It's just something you get because you bought the products that use it, okay? And so you get this cloud interface that you can use to coordinate the things you bought, whether they are in turn cloud services or whether they're on-prem boxes. So we're not charging for it. It's just something we put out there to help you be able to use your existing Cisco investments, which, trust me, we appreciate, better, literally better together, which is 2 words you might have heard put together before by Cisco. But this is really where that rubber hits the road. This is what we're doing to make it possible for you to use those Cisco products more effectively and more efficiently. And it's dead simple to configure. This actually shows up terribly here, but this says Control-C, this says Control-V, and this is 3 beers because you're done. You copied your API keys, you pasted them into where they're needed, and you're done. Now, there's different levels of complexity of configuring these integrations. The easiest one takes less than 1 minute. The most complicated one can take up to 12 minutes, and then you're done. You don't have to do it every time you do an investigation. You set it up once, it's configured, it's done. I'm going to show you a quick example of how one of these can be configured. How can you set up threat response with AMP for endpoints? So you go into AMP for endpoints, accounts, API credentials, new API credential. I'm going to give this read and write access so that I can find out if the file's been seen, and I can block the file if I want to. Big warning comes up, yeah, security, security. Click create. Third-party API client ID, censored out for my convenience. API key, again, basically a username and password. Great, copy those off. Go into the threat response interface, modules, add new module, make it an AMP for endpoints module. I'm going to name it AMP for endpoints because I'm an engineer, not a poet. Here's my API client ID. Here's my API key. Create module. I'm done. That's just one example. It's not the easiest example. There's actually some that are even simpler than that. It's not the most difficult example either, but they all kind of go like that. What does integration bring to the products that are threat response capable? Here's an example. This is the device trajectory in AMP for endpoints. Talked about this earlier. I have a file hash. I have an IP address. I have another IP address. They've all got these little drop downs next to them. I click that. Those are my threat response powered options. I can take immediate steps based on this file hash and the other modules that I might have. I can search for it in Threat Grid from right here. I can see what Umbrella knows about it. I can investigate it in a new investigation in Threat Response, etc. What if I have a whole bunch of different Cisco tools? I have a fat Swiss Army knife is what I have. But I have more capability all in that one place. This is the same example we were looking at earlier. 17 observables, 8 modules, all in one screen, all gathered together in a single operation. Third-party tools, we have the browser plugin, which works on any content in the browser. So it could be a blog article, it could be a security alert, it could be Splunk, it could be management interface for any other product. and we've got the API. So we've got a very well-documented API in threat response itself. I've been talking about APIs for 52.5 minutes, but this is actually threat response's API. So we use all these different APIs so that you don't have to, but we offer you an API, one API that you have to use instead of, in the last example, 8. And you can do all the same steps. You can tie this into your existing tool sets. You can tie this into your existing workflows. If you've got scripts already written, there's actually already a threat response Python module written, which you can just import, and then use threat response very easily in your existing Python scripts. All of the API documentation is top-notch. It's a REST API. It's easy to use. And there's even prototyping tools. If you go to the threat response website and you go to the help, the question mark up there, there's actually prototyping tools in the help that you can use to test out your API queries. Kind of like a cheap version of Postman, if you want to think of it like that. It's very easy to write scripts. Here I'm taking arbitrary text input and putting it into a script that then looks it up against threat response, pulls out all of the observables, sees what the verdicts are, tells me that I've seen some of them, and generates a URL at the bottom that if I click on that URL and paste it, click or paste, then I get that enrichment, or sorry, that investigation. It's building right here. So what that's useful for is if you get emails on a regular basis that contain threat intelligence, and you want something in bulk to batch those up and see if you've been affected by it, that script, which took me like an afternoon to write and is maybe 20 lines, will pipe through all of that, and if there's nothing, if it hasn't been seen in your network, it'll just silently drop it. If it has been seen, it'll send you an email with a link where you can see how it was seen, what was seen, and in what context, saving you all the time of checking for things that it turns out you weren't affected by. This is one of my favorite ones, a chat bot. Oh, the text colors are terrible on this screen, I apologize. But this is WebEx Teams. Your SOC might use some other chat functionality. If it allows bots, you can do this kind of thing. You can have a chat bot sitting in the room. You can call it CTR, or in this case, Ask Will. You can call it whatever you want. But it's easy enough to tell that bot then to use threat response on the back end to go look up an observable. Hey, what do you know about this file hash? Just type it into the chat window. It'll look up, it'll report back to the chat channel what it found. And then you can tell it to block things, to take those response actions as well. So, I babbled for 54.5 minutes now out of our allotted 60. If there are any questions, now's the time to ask them quickly.
One. If you're running an investigation that is like a point-in-time thing, can you rerun investigations at a later date to check if maybe in the meantime somebody did something that would hit or give you results now?
Yeah, so the question is, if you run an investigation, that's a point-in-time thing, can you then save that investigation and run it again at a later date? And the answer is actually yes. I didn't get into any of the documentation features that threat response has because like 54.5 minutes, 55 now. But yeah, some of those features are available. So you can take a snapshot at the point in time. So you can save what the results were when you first did the investigation, and then you can save the investigation itself in a casebook, which is basically a list of observables, a set of observables that you can like put timestamps in and type out notes about what you did and what you found and save that, and then you can very easily run it later by just loading that casebook and clicking investigate to refresh all of the lookups.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Anything else?
You showed that you could block Alexa in this case, I think it was.
Yeah.
So you blocked it out of the network.
So we performed host isolation on an endpoint.
So from a perspective of having multiple teams, you block something out of the network, but you might not be the one who has to get into the machine and change things to get rid of whatever was in there.
Right.
So is there something in the tool that can say, okay, send a message to that team to make sure that they need to get rid of this, this, and this? Or is it just block it, that's it?
There isn't a messaging capability between users built into the threat response tool. We're guessing that every SOC already has that kind of capability, like send it in the email. And you can include a link to the investigation in the email. You can include a link to the incident or the casebook or the snapshot easily enough in the email. So we did not build a communication platform between operators on the same team into threat response.
Maybe that's just an use case for a bot and just putting them in a different room and...
Yeah, so the assumption is if the trait source is known, or the target or whatever, you will just isolate it. If it's not known, you will wait. You will block it proactively and you will wait for the user to get back to you guys. to the SOC team and say, hey, what's going on, right?
Yeah, like we're not trying to solve the inside the company communications problem, if there is one. We're just lessening the amount of time it takes to investigate and remediate these kinds of issues.
But if you're going to do this, you already mentioned that you're doing this with APIs, so I can think of things where you would use something like ServiceNow to hook into that. You can use ServiceNow for that option. Even.
You can. And we have, so third-party integrations are a thing that we're taking quite seriously, and we have a team in the engineering team of the integrations group whose job is to prioritize and then effectuate integrations with third-party projects. And ticketing systems, and especially the most popular ticketing systems, are high on the list of integration targets for third-party products. I'm not going to name names, but you maybe did.
Yep. Okay.
So I did get that right. That is a cloud solution that you.
That's correct. It's a cloud solution. There's regional clouds available in North America, Europe, and Asia.
All right.
Just a quick question to clarify. For example, I want to block a URL, yeah? Could be that an URL is blocked in a Firepower device, could be in a WSA device, or could be in a DNS umbrella context. Would that be 3 actions in threat response or just one action that is blocking all 3 of them?
In the current iteration, it would be 3 different actions. You would select which technology you want to use, and then you get the menu of, well, I shouldn't say that. In one menu, you get your list of technologies, and under each technology, you have the options that that technology has for response. And so you might have WSA, and then in a future version of the integration where we support that, you might have WSA and then block this URL, and then further down, you might have umbrella and block the domain. And you would do each of those things separately. Okay. But I mentioned that we're working on being able to add custom responses and chain responses. And so theoretically, getting really close to talking roadmap stuff, but theoretically, in some future version, you might be able to take an action that would then, you would have assigned to this action, assign the following actions, block it in WSA, and also in Umbrella, and also in Firepower. And so you would click the one thing to block, basically block everywhere.
Sure.
It would do that.
It's like the security onion, yeah? Many layers.
It does. And that's, like I said, that's the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah. Great to hear.
We're solving it with feedback from users like you guys who tell us, like, what are the problems you're actually facing in SOCs? And I take this kind of feedback seriously. So literally the things you brought up, I'm going to bring back to the engineering team. That's also part of my job. All right, listen, you guys have been great. You had some very, very thought-provoking questions that I enjoyed answering a whole lot. Thanks for having me. Everyone's busy, and I appreciate the hour of your time. Enjoy the rest of Cisco Live. Take care.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.